Good morning.
Morning.
We are continuing in our study of the minor prophets. And we are, well, I forget what lesson it really is, whether it's 37, 38?
It's 38.
38. But we are in Hosea chapter 12 this morning. And lo and behold, I have split screen going up here, at least on my laptop. I don't have to be playing with my cell phone to have the Bible in front of me. So, you know, you can teach an old dog new tricks every now and then. It's amazing. So for our class today, again, we got 12, 13, and 14. That's the next 3 weeks. After that, get into the book of Micah. And boy, Micah, I'm already studying in it, getting ready, and I think it's going to be a really good study. Not as many chapters, so we'll go through it pretty quickly, but boy, lots of good material there.
Have you gone through the minor prophets and, in your years of preaching in classes, or is this really the first in depth?
This is the first in-depth. I've had survey classes and stuff such. I've read through them many times, but just to really try to get a good handle on it and to teach it, this is my first time. Yeah. All right, so we're going to start with verse 2 because verse 1 should have been in Hosea chapter 11. So we're going to talk in this chapter about Ephraim's sins that were worthy of capital punishment. Now, you know what we mean by capital punishment. Death. And when we're talking about death, we go back to the 10 Commandments. And going from the 10 Commandments, there were certain commandments that were given that later, after the giving of the 10 Commandments, the punishment for breaking some of those commandments was to be death. All right? For example, shedding innocent blood, adultery. We'll get into a few things here in a moment, but the concept is there that those things were supposed to be put away in Israel. And when I say Israel, of course, we're thinking there of the United Kingdoms. But especially with God's people. So, Hosea gives, first of all, an indictment against Judah. Now, we've been talking about Hosea being mainly a prophecy, a book written about the northern kingdom. But here you're going to get a little bit of taste of what Micah is going to be talking about, prophecies against Judah. So, verses 2 through 6. The Lord has an indictment against Judah and will punish Jacob according to his ways. Jacob is usually referring to the northern kingdom, right? Because Jacob's name is changed to Israel. But here it's even accorded to Judah because Judah's going to stray from the path, the way that God had given them. He will repay him according to his deeds. In the womb he took his brother by the heel. In his manhood he strove with God. He strove with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought his favor. He met God at Bethel, and there God spoke with us. The Lord, the God of hosts, the Lord is his memorial name, and the Lord there, of course, is Yahweh. Or some of the, like the King James Version, would be Jehovah, Of course, they don't put it out there as Jehovah, it's the Lord. So you, verse 6, by the help of your God, return. Judah is told to what? Return, hold fast to love and justice, and wait continually for your God. So, Jacob, or Israel, the individual, remember, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob was the son of Isaac, right? Rebekah was the mother. She was the mother of twins. The twins, when they were born, fought in their mother's womb, strove together. It wasn't a very good time for her. But when they were born, the what do they call the women that were there? The midwives, the ones helping, they were to make sure which one is born first. Why? Because the firstborn gets the double portion, right? So, Esau is born first. But when Esau comes out of the womb, Jacob's got his hand around his heel. He's holding on. And that's why he's called the supplanter. The foot is the planter. Did you ever get a plantar wart? Get them on the bottom of your feet. All right. So he's the supplanter. But from that time, there's always strife between Jacob and Esau. Correct? All right. So there it is. He fought with his brother, wrestled with him. Later on, he wrestles with God as a man. Because of the strife between Jacob and Esau, Esau was a hunter. Jacob was a guy who stayed around the house. You know, he liked to cook. He was a chef, I guess you would say. Anyway, because of the situation, Esau's out hunting. He comes back. He's hungry. Jacob has prepared some stew, pottage. Look, various translations on how that is used. But Esau says, "Give me some food. I'm hungry. I'm going to starve to death." Well, what will you give me? Trade me your birthright. Give me the double portion, and I will give you food. Right? And Esau does it. Oh, what good's a double portion for me of the inheritance if I starve to death? So he's making what seems to be a logical decision, but really it's a bad decision all around. So because of that, then he says, well, he's tricked me. Jacob has tricked me. He's deceived me into doing this. Later on, there is a little bit of deception that takes place because Esau figures, well, I'll just kill Jacob and I'll get what I need. The blessing is passed on by Isaac as he puts his hands on the sons' heads. Jacob goes in with like a hairy vest, whatever, and deceives his father. He thinks it's Esau, the oldest one, and gives him the blessing of the double portion. So when Esau comes, he gets nothing, basically, minor blessing. So he's going to kill him. Jacob has to flee. When Jacob flees back from Canaan to the old country, fleeing for his life, he stops at a place called Bethel. Bethel. Now, I don't think it's called Bethel at the time. It later becomes Bethel, and there he uses a stone as a pillow. And there in the night he has a vision. He has a vision of a ladder going up into heaven and angels going up and down the ladder, right? So he makes a little altar there. He does some kind of a religious, whether there's a whole sacrifice or whatever. But eventually he goes, he works 7 years, was it, for Rachel? And he gets deceived. Now, if there's anything that a deceiver doesn't like, it's being deceived. But there he is. He's stuck with Leah. And so he makes a deal with Laban, and he gets Rachel, but he's got to work another 7 years. Now, he gets her, but he's got to stay there for another 7 years. And he gets, are all the children, I think maybe all the children are born there, or most of them are born there in that foreign land. Then he gets rich, and he decides it's time to leave. And because he leaves in the middle of the night, Laban doesn't like it, and Laban pursues him. And he fears that Laban is going to kill him. He divides his troop up into two. Right? Here's Leah and her children, and here's Rachel and her children, separates the two, and then he's off like in the middle. He's going to escape, you know. And that night, as Laban is approaching, he wrestles with an angel, with the Lord, with God. You know, the language is very ambiguous there. Sounds like an angel at times, sounds like the Lord at times. But wrestles all night long, physically wrestles. And in the morning, the angel or the Lord said, "Let me go. Give me a blessing, I'll let you go," and lets him go. But he touches his hip, and his hip comes out of joint, and Jacob limps for the rest of his life. But that's that point where Jacob is then Israel, and he's the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. But you can see what Hosea is talking about here. The nature of Jacob was to be quick-witted, deceptive, grabbing onto something, even grabbing a hold of an angel or the Lord and demanding a blessing. Give me something, give me something. Now, he had to go and he had to work for 14 years to get the 2 wives, or at least to get the one wife that he wanted. He gets, shall we say, stuck with the other one. But you know the stories that are involved there. He actually becomes a slave in a foreign country before he gets the blessing to become the father of the children of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel. So we would say, genetically, maybe, but to a degree genetically, to a larger degree, the children growing up in that environment then take on the characteristic of their father. And the further stories then of those 12 sons of Jacob and how they deal with one another, how they deal with Joseph, how they deal with their father, sell their brother into slavery, and then lie to their father about what happened to him. Where did they get such an attitude? Where did they get such a belief system, so to speak? Got it from their father, didn't they? And mothers, go back and read some of the stories about how Leah and Rachel, sisters, acted between each other.
Adding to that, being wives to the same man.
Wives to the same man. And
That's deceit and
And-
conflict in every form.
the children are half brothers, half sisters. You talk about family dynamics going crazy. This is as bad as David's family. Yeah. So, as Jacob, their ancestral father, could turn to the Lord and be blessed, as deceptive, as unspiritual, to use that term, maybe go back and do it a better way. As worldly as Jacob was, the Lord could still use him and bless him. Because at some point, Jacob makes a change. You follow me? In the dynamics of it. He makes a change. Because look then, after he has this encounter with the angel or with the Lord, what is his relationship then with Esau? See how that changes. See how his life changes. There's something that when a person encounters the Lord, and I'm going to use it in that phrase, not just an angel, encounters the Lord, their life changes for good. Was he a perfect man after that? No, but he was growing after that. But what happens with his family? They hardly grow, do they? They hardly grow. So the people, you have these two ways, and we've talked about it before, how Israel is a name for the nation, but it's also a name for the people. And when the Apostle Paul says in, I believe it's Romans chapter 9, we know that not all of Israel is of Israel. What? What's he talking about? The same thing we've been talking about since we've got in, looking at Amos and, well, even Jonah coming down through. Not everybody who lived in physical Israel and was physically related to Jacob, family-wise, was the Israel of God. A true covenant, in a true covenant relationship with the Lord. You're following me, right? There were people who were, okay, we're going to look at King Ahaz, especially when we get into the book of Micah. He was a descendant of Jacob. He was of one of those tribes of the north. Was he of the Israel of God? God didn't claim him. God would say, I don't know him. The Pharisees and Sadducees who tried, convicted, and had Jesus crucified, were they the Israel of God? No. But were the 12, were they the Israel of God? Yes. Was Cornelius, a Gentile, in Acts chapter 10? Upon his conversion, was he of the Israel of God? Yes. When we were converted, did we become the Israel of God? Yes, according to the Apostle Paul. But we had no physical relationship to Israel, not to Jacob. That's the change that took place. So, what happens with Israel, the nation, turmoil? They're gone. It's gone. The nation's gone. The people, turmoil, slavery. But there's hope for the people. We always want to keep that in mind. All right. He strove with an angel and prevailed. He wept and sought his favor. He met with God at Bethel. Bethel means the house of God, right? This is verse 4. He met God at Bethel, and there God spoke with us. That was one of the places I believe that the tabernacle was. So the people had a relationship with the Lord, with God there. The Lord, the God of hosts, Yahweh, the Lord, is his memorial name. That's what they were supposed to call him. You know, they wouldn't even spell the name out. YHWH. And if they wrote it in scriptures or copying the scriptures, there was a certain procedure they'd have to do. Something like they would stop writing, they would put their pen down, they would go, they'd wash, they put on clean clothes, and they would go and they'd get a new pen and they would write it in Yahweh, WHYH, because they only used consonants, okay? Then they'd go, and they'd throw that pen away, and they'd wash, put on clean clothes, and go back and pick up where all kinds of rituals, because they didn't want to say, they didn't even want to say it. Okay? It's like today, people wouldn't want to say Jehovah. Of course, I think I've talked to you before why some people say Jehovah, some people say Yahweh. Right? Why do people say Jehovah? Because there was a movement to remove anything Jewish from the Bible. It was basically a prejudicial movement, right? Because there's no J. It would have been Yehovah.
It's kind of like, people that are named Jose or Jesus, they don't say the J for that name.
Right. Okay. So what's he telling? He's telling Judah, verse 6. So you, by the help of your God, return. Judah, you've made some mistakes, but you haven't gotten to the point of capital punishment where I'm going to destroy the nation. They could return as a nation. And we'll see through the minor prophets that they do. Right? Hold fast to love and justice and wait continually for your God. Wait continually for your God. And when we get into the book of Micah especially, that phrase, that type of phraseology, thinking, comes clear up into the New Testament. Because there was a man by the name of Simon who, when John was presented at the temple, when Jesus was presented at the temple, okay, born in Bethlehem, 8 days later he's circumcised, 40 days after his birth, he is presented at the temple. There's a man there by the name of Simon, who, it says, was waiting for the consolation of Israel. They were waiting. And that's from the time clear back through, even clear back to the time before David. They were waiting for the Messiah, who was to come through. You remember which tribe? Judah. All right, verses 7 through 9. A false security in men. A merchant in whose hands are false balances, he loves to oppress. Ephraim has said, "Ah, but I am rich. I have found wealth for myself. In all my labors they cannot find in me iniquity or sin. I am the Lord your God from the land of Egypt. I will again make you dwell in tents as in the days of the appointed feast." This has a couple different meanings here. Substantial points, okay? Number one, why could Ephraim, as a people, and we're talking about the elites, the upper class of the people, why could they cheat and steal? You remember what we talked about before? Excuse me. Number one, they had no conscience. But number two, how did they procedurally do it?
I don't know.
The way they do it today. They bribe the judges. Right? Bribe the judges. A merchant in whose hands are false balances, he loves to oppress. Now, who loves to oppress? Well, that merchant, right? The merchant loves to oppress. How does he oppress people? Well, in his hands are false balances. He's got his thumb on the scales. He's cheating. He loves it. And he gets away with it because who can say anything to him? He's bribing the judges, right? So watching the movie White Lightning last night. Burt Reynolds. Seen that? And that's where the sheriff said, he's talking with his lawyer. His lawyer's telling him, hey, the feds are coming down. You can't do things the way you used to. Oh, what if some of these guys who are moonshiners, they come in with their bag of money and sit it here on my desk and I distribute that around to my deputies and all. Now, what's the harm of that, Well, yeah, the sheriff ran Bogan County in Arkansas, apparently. Well, what's the problem with that? Everybody gets a share. No, not everybody gets a share. Somebody gets cheated, right? So Ephraim has said, verse 8, "Ah, but I am rich. I have found wealth for myself. In all my labors, they cannot find in me iniquity or sin." They can't find sin in me. Remember what Jesus said to the woman caught in adultery after he wrote on the ground? You remember what happened? All the men dropped their stones and left. And he looked up and said, "Where are your accusers?" well, that was justice being done there, but what if all the people who are doing the judging are paid off? Who's going to convict you of sin? Can such things happen in the church?
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I won't talk about your sin if you don't talk about my sin. A little bit of bribery there. Yeah. Well, let's just forget that this whole thing happened. Let's just start all over again. Yeah. Start anew. You know how often that works? Never. So, but you see what's happening there. You pay off the judges, you don't get convicted, you just continue on. But see, who had made them rich, really? Who had blessed them to the point where they could be rich? And not only them, but basically everybody.
The Lord himself.
The Lord. But because they took these steps, there were some who were super wealthy. And when you have some who are super wealthy, you're going to have some who are super poor. Okay. Now, some people are going to be poor because, poor and super poor, that's their choice. Some people can't help being poor. Okay? There are some people who are handicapped. There are some people that can't do for themselves. Those are the people we help to look out for, right? That's who society's supposed to help look out for. There are some people who are just too lazy to work, okay? That's a different story. But yet, the blessings of the Lord makes the sun to shine on the just and the unjust, and the rain to fall on good, and however it goes in that. The opportunity's out there, except when people come in and, I don't want to say it, they take the system that God has put in place and they modify it to their own benefit. They actually do the cheating. So, verse 9, say, after the one, I've done this and I've done this because I'm so smart. I know you bribe the judges. You bribe the ones who are in power. Look at verse 9. I am the Lord your God from the land of Egypt. I will again make you dwell in tents as in the days of the appointed feast. You cannot bribe God. What are you going to give God? That you can bribe him to say, okay, I'll just forget about your sins. I'll let you sin with impunity, without punishment. We talked about that before with the medieval church and the letters that they would send, letters that they would give, indulgences, right? Yeah, in case you sin while you're on this business trip, which essentially meant when you sin on this business trip, and there's no priest to give you the what's that final deal?
The rights, final rights.
Yeah, but you'll be okay.
Absolution.
Yeah.
Absolution.
Yeah, the last rites, yeah, you'll be okay. But it's not an if, it's when, it's when. God doesn't play games like that. The chief judge of the universe declared them guilty, and would make them slaves as punishment. If they were allowed to live, they'd be slaves as punishment. And instead of living in fine houses, what would they live in?
Yes.
Tents. As in the days of the appointed feast. Now, and what were the days of the appointed feast? You remember?
Feast of the Passover?
Not the Passover.
Yeah.
Not Pentecost. That's two of the three. The other big one is Feast of the Booths. And at the Feast of the Booths, which was in the fall, about the time of the Day of Atonement, they were to build booths to live in, to remind them of when they lived in the wilderness, when God was bringing them out. They'd have to live a whole week in like the booths, tents, all right? Follow me? But see what it says here in Hosea. Remember what we said? Hosea is writing about 735 or so, 740, somewhere along in there. Book of Nehemiah is written just under 500, like maybe at the latest 460. Okay, I'm not absolutely sure. I'd have to go back and look. But Nehemiah goes back, they rebuilt it. I'm pretty sure it's in the book of Nehemiah. Or Ezra. But when they're reading the law, and Ezra's the one reading the law to them, remember they do it for so many hours a day, and the people are standing listening. They read about the Feast of the Booths, the Tabernacles. And all of a sudden, it's, well, wait a minute. We haven't done that since the time of Joshua. Joshua was about, what? 1200? So you see how that takes on that double? You haven't kept the law. Maybe 800 years? 700 years you haven't kept this feast? That's okay, we're making up for it. We've added a bunch of feasts that are not even in the Bible. Hosea chapter 12, verse 10 through 14. Blood guilt of Ephraim. And when I say blood guilt, we're looking at capital punishment. I spoke to the prophets. It was I who multiplied visions, and through the prophets gave parables. If there is iniquity in Gilead, they shall surely come to nothing. In Gilgal they sacrifice bulls. They sacrifice bulls. Their altars also are like stone heaps on the furrows of the field. Jacob fled to the land of Ephraim. We talked about that in the first part, right? There Israel served for a wife, and for a wife he guarded sheep. By a prophet the Lord brought Israel up from Egypt. That's Moses. And by a prophet, again Moses, he was guarded. Ephraim has given bitter provocation. So his Lord will leave his blood guilt on him and will repay him for his disgraceful deeds. Back to verse 10. I spoke to the prophets. It was I